You awaken to a quiet ache, an absence beneath the surface that you framed as hunger, or boredom, or the weather of your soul. But it is none of these. It is desire. Freud once wrote that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. This ache you feel is not random. It is the psyche speaking in symbolic form, a signal from the repressed self, demanding attention. And desire does not speak in daylight phrases, it murmurs, in half-forgotten images, in the tremble of memory and the restless reappearance of certain dreams. It is the coded language of the unconscious, telling you there is something you lost, something you repressed, something you never allowed yourself to want. And so every night you dream of rooms that shift when you look away, of mirrors that fracture before they show you your face, of voices calling you down empty corridors, and every morning you brush it off, call it nonsense, when in truth, it is the raw script of your deeper life demanding translation. Because desire is not demand, but signal, cue, symbol, not the child's tantrum, but the child's whisper, not the ego's loud declaration, but the id's secret tremor. According to Freud, these signals stem from repressed drives, unconscious urges that find expression in disguised symbolic forms. To translate them requires silence, not the silence of ignorance, but the silence of listening, the silence of someone no longer afraid to sit with discomfort until the discomfort speaks, until it reveals the hidden wound that gave it birth, the wound that was repressed in order to survive, and that continues to survive by hiding under the guise of your everyday dissatisfaction. You sense this in the way you reach for things: drugs, approval, hustle, intimacy, and never find what you search for. Every pursuit is a misdirection, because the real need is not for more of anything, it is for depth. According to Freud, this is a classic example of displacement, when an emotional charge tied to a forbidden object or memory is redirected toward a safer substitute. Depth you bailed out on long ago, when the pain became too big, when shame demanded exile, when the inner exile became safer than the storm beneath your own skin. And so you anesthetized, you numbed, you performed, you smiled, you climbed. But the architecture of your longing turned into a crypt which now echoes with a phantom voice you don't remember injuring you. And each time you light a match, another lover, another drink, another project, you see the smoke curling into the same hall of ruins. Because desire is haunted. It is grief in disguise. It is hunger that never ends, and it does not go away. Freud called this the return of the repressed. Whatever is pushed out of consciousness finds a way back in, not through words, but through repetition, symptom, and dream, until you begin to listen. And only then does the code begin to reveal itself. The same symbol repeating, the same nightmare replaying, the same misstep repeating until you can't mistake it for chance. This is not bad luck. It is the psyche organizing itself around what was once forbidden, because the unconscious is not a wasteland. It is a library of everything you gave away, every memory you closed, every part of you sold, every fiction you wrote to survive. And in this library, desire leaves marginal notes, a flicker, a flash, a fragment that surfaces when you no longer have the strength to distract yourself. Do you want to understand the code? Then let us go deeper, beyond the veneer of reason, into the dark room where exposure happens behind your eyes. Let us watch the shadows of your own choices develop until they reveal their latent image, your hidden self, unashamed. Let us walk together into the structural anatomy of your longing and trace the root that thought it could grow without water. And in those hidden roots, we will begin to recognize the pattern of your psychic survival, and perhaps by understanding it, begin to loosen its grip. Will you follow? Very well. Let us descend further. No turning back, no reassurances, no comforting metaphors to soften what the unconscious demands we see. The code is not written in clarity, it is etched in tension. Every desire, every obsession, every recurring frustration is not merely a mistake or a flaw. It is a compromise, a truce struck long ago between what you truly needed and what you were allowed to express. And so repression was not silence, it was survival. And in that survival, you buried not only your shame, but your voice, your truth, your grief, your hunger. What you call personality is often just the scar tissue of long-forgotten negotiations. The dutiful one, the achiever, the rebel, the caretaker, the cold one. All roles, all strategies, none of them the origin. They are the masks shaped by the unspoken command, be this or be abandoned. And so you obeyed, because obedience meant love, or at least proximity to it. But the cost was you, and that cost accumulates interest in the form of symptoms. Your panic, a message, your numbness, a protest, your addiction, a translation. These are not problems to fix. They are hieroglyphs of a deeper wound, and your work is not to silence them, but to learn their language, to read the architecture of your own ruin, to trace the psychic hand that sketched your suffering in symbolic repetition in failed relationships, in self-sabotage, in dreams that repeat like broken records. And here's the terror that psychoanalysis never flinches from. What you repress does not disappear. It organizes your reality in the shadows. You think you're choosing, but it is choosing you. The unconscious is not passive. It is a playwright. It writes the same scene over and over, casting new actors in old roles, hoping, praying that this time you will see the pattern, that this time you will interrupt the play. But interruption requires grief, because to name the pattern is to admit what you missed, the love you didn't get, the safety you never had, the truth that no one protected. And it is easier to chase new outcomes than to grieve lost origins. But this is the work. This is the descent. The darkness is not your enemy. It is the archive. And you cannot become whole until you turn toward what you exile. Then let us continue deeper into the chambers where resistance lives like a guardian at the threshold of truth, disguised not as rage, but as fatigue, not as fear, but as boredom, not as repression, but as distraction. Resistance is not laziness, it is defense. It is the psyche's way of preserving the very structures that kept you alive, even when those structures now strangle you. And it speaks through delay, through compulsive busyness, through the unexplainable dread that rises each time you get close to the source. The resistance is intelligent. It knows that to uncover the truth is to rearrange everything. You feel it when you start to touch something real and immediately reach for your phone, or pour another drink, or tell yourself you're being too dramatic. But the part of you that minimizes is the part that learned early that truth is dangerous, that to speak your desire was to invite punishment, that to feel fully was to risk chaos. So instead, you learn to cope, you learn to explain, you learn to rationalize your own disappearance. And so now, when the unconscious tries to return what was lost in dreams, in symbols, in relational conflict, you resist. Because healing isn't just beautiful, it's violent. It shatters what kept you intact. It burns the house where the false self was raised, and you have grown attached to the furniture of your dysfunction. But make no mistake, Every symptom is sacred. Every neurotic pattern is an encoded map back to the place where something broke. And if you follow it, not analyze it from a distance, not reduce it to a disorder, but follow it with presence, it will lead you to the truth. The truth that your wounds have been staging a theater of repetition in your life, choosing lovers who echo your parents, creating crises that match your childhood chaos, sabotaging opportunities that threaten to make you visible. This is the compulsion to repeat, practice, and it is not madness, it is logic. The unconscious repeats what was unresolved not to punish, but to complete. It is trying, again and again, to get it right, to find the ending that never came, to finally say what was once unspeakable. You think you are broken because you are stuck in loops, but the loops are the psyche's cry for liberation. To break them, you must become fluent in their language. This is the threshold where you stop blaming the world and start recognizing your architecture, where you stop trying to win love and start grieving its absence, where you stop projecting your needs onto others and start reclaiming them as your own. Projection is not illusion. It is a mirror, and every mirror shattered in anger is a chance to see the face beneath the persona. Then we continue past the walls of defense into the basement where shame lives like a god in exile, silent, watching, shaping. Shame is not weakness. It is the memory of being seen and judged at the moment you were most yourself. It is the scar left by the original wound, when you were punished, not for what you did, but for what you were. A feeling too big, a need too loud, a joy too free. And so, to survive, you fragmented. You became acceptable. You traded wholeness for approval. This was not conscious. The child does not reason, the child absorbs. The gaze of the caregiver becomes law. The mood of the room becomes scripture. And so you learn to perform, to shrink, to hide your instincts beneath layers of silence. But instincts do not die. They become ghosts inhabiting your anxiety, your compulsions, your illnesses. And the ego, the mask you built to navigate the world, becomes both your shield and your prison. The ego is not the enemy, but it is a construct assembled piece by piece from the expectations of others. It is the architecture of survival, not the essence of being, and it will fight to protect itself, because to question it is to risk unraveling the entire edifice. But the truth is, you are not your mask. You are what was masked. You are the animal beneath the armor, the chaos beneath the calm, the full spectrum of emotion you were taught to fear. And here is where most turn back, because beneath shame lies grief, the grief of how much was abandoned, how many years were spent exiling yourself, how much life was lived as a performance. This grief cannot be bypassed. It must be sat with, breathed through, felt in the body, where all repression begins. And it is here, in the descent, where the psyche begins to awaken, not through inspiration, but through mourning. Mourning the self that was never allowed to be. Mourning the childhood that required acting. Mourning the intimacy that was distorted by projection and fear. This is not a breakdown. It is a return. When you stop pathologizing your pain, you begin to hear its message. When you stop trying to fix yourself, you begin to see you were never broken, only divided. Split between the self you were told to be and the self you truly are. And the unconscious, all this time, has been loyal not to your mask, but to your truth. It has sent you symbols, nightmares, conflicts, longings. It has tried again and again to call you home, not to comfort but to coherence, not to happiness but to wholeness. Then breathe deep, for now we pass through the most dangerous illusion of all idealization, the need to make someone perfect or to become perfect yourself is not about love or excellence. It is about terror, the terror of knowing that love is unreliable, that caregivers fail, that the world is imperfect and indifferent. And so, to survive that truth, the psyche constructs God's false fathers, flawless mothers, untouchable teachers, messianic lovers. We idealize because it feels safer to worship than to risk true closeness. Because closeness means seeing and being seen without defense. But idealization always collapses. It must, because no one can carry the projection of your salvation. And when it collapses, what remains is mourning. Mourning the fantasy. Mourning the illusion that someone else could rescue you from yourself. This mourning is not regression, it is maturation. To grieve the God is to step into your own authority. To stop begging others to be what you were denied. To stop waiting for the perfect parent to arrive in the body of a partner, a friend, a therapist, a leader. No one is coming. And that is not tragedy. It is freedom. This is the crossing point. The psychic death of dependency. The moment when you stand without illusions. No rescuer, no enemy. Just yourself, raw, unfinished, breathing. And behind that moment of collapse emerges the strange, subtle flicker of something else. Not hope, not triumph, but desire reborn. Not the compulsive, addictive desire that seeks to fill the void, but a quieter, steadier desire. The desire to know yourself, to touch truth, to feel with unmuted intensity, to want without shame, to speak without disguise. This desire is not naive. It has died and returned. It no longer wants the ideal. It wants the real connection, real freedom, real suffering, real joy. The kind that cannot be packaged or sold or performed. And with it comes a new kind of power, not domination but depth, not control but capacity. The power to be present with contradiction, the power to endure uncertainty, the power to listen to your own unconscious with reverence rather than resistance. And this is where psychoanalysis ceases to be theory and becomes devotion, not to a doctrine, but to the project of making the unconscious conscious, of decoding the dream, of tracing the symptom back to its symbolic root, of walking the labyrinth of repression, not to escape, but to remember. You begin to see that the dream is not nonsense. It is a map, that the fear is not weakness. It is a threshold, that the repetition is not failure. It is fidelity, the soul refusing to abandon what was once cast out. Would you like to continue into the final movement, where this descent becomes a return, where symbolic literacy gives way to embodied integration, and where desire is no longer denied, but dignified? Let me guide you there. Then stay close. We now approach the sacred threshold, where descent becomes return, not a rise back to the surface unchanged, but a re-emergence, rewritten by what you dared to face. Integration is not about resolution. It is not about closure. It is about carrying learning, to hold the paradox of your being without needing it to make sense. You are not one story. You are not one self. You are not one desire. You are a living system of contradictions. Strength braided with fragility, clarity shadowed by confusion, love stained with longing and loss. This is what it means to become psychologically sovereign, not to transcend the unconscious, but to enter a new relationship with it. To stop exiling your impulses and begin inviting them into dialogue. To treat your symptoms not as enemies, but as initiations. Anxiety becomes a bell. Depression, a silence asking to be heard. Anger, a boundary waiting to be drawn. Shame, the doorway back to your abandoned self. And you begin to walk differently in the world. You no longer chase intensity to avoid stillness. You no longer dress your trauma in charisma. You no longer mistake chaos for passion. You become quiet, not because you have nothing to say, but because you no longer need to scream to be real. Your desire becomes less frantic, more focused, less about being seen, more about seeing, less about control, more about communion. You are not above your pain, but you are no longer possessed by it. You learn to move with it, to breathe with it, to translate it. And here, finally, you meet the unconscious not as a threat, but as a partner. You stop fearing your dreams. You stop denying your hunger. You stop editing your truth to remain acceptable. You become, at last, the analyst of your own soul. Then let us continue slowly now, reverently, for this final movement is not a crescendo, but a convergence. Here, in the aftermath of descent and the stillness of return, you do not rise as someone new. You remain who you've always been. The difference is, now you know. You know the source of the tremor in your voice. You know why the same door keeps appearing in your dreams. You know why you pulled away when love got too close. You know the contours of your defenses, not to destroy them, but to meet them with eyes open. This is the paradox. The more conscious you become, the less you need to fix. The compulsion to change gives way to the courage to witness. And in that witnessing, something ancient within you exhales the self who waited hidden beneath the performance, the inner child, yes, but also the inner elder, the one who saw everything, who remembered when you forgot, who guarded your truth through years of silence. Now, integration becomes ritual, a way of walking, a way of choosing, a way of staying, not escaping discomfort, but staying with the edge until it softens. Not seeking perfect clarity, but staying in the tension until it speaks. This is discipline, not of behavior, but of awareness. To remain with the present moment, even when it burns. To trust the psyche's rhythm, even when it feels slow. To let go of the urgency to heal, and instead make space for what wants to unfold. Here, the myth of control collapses. You were never meant to conquer your unconscious. You were meant to befriend it, to become its interpreter, its witness, its vessel. The ego, once swollen with pride or shriveled by shame, now becomes an instrument clear, flexible, attuned. It no longer drives the psyche. It listens. It collaborates. And now, desire once split, once denied, once turned against itself returns with dignity. Not inflated by fantasy, not diminished by repression, but restored as a guiding force. You no longer ask for permission to want. You simply allow the truth to move through you. This is what freedom feels like. Not absence of conflict, but coherence within it. You can now carry the full weight of your life, not because it got lighter, but because you got deeper. And finally, you begin to understand. This work was never about becoming someone else. It was about remembering what had been disowned, reclaiming what had been split, honoring what had been distorted. You see yourself in fuller light, and in doing so, you begin to see others differently too, not as enemies or saviors, but as mirrors. Each one carrying their own exiled parts, their own unspoken grief, their own unconscious patterns repeating like ancient songs. Then step with me beyond the boundaries of personal memory, beyond the terrain of family, history, and self-concept. Here, the unconscious opens not only downward into the personal, but outward into the collective, the ancestral, the mythic. This is the space Jung called the unus mundus, the one world, not as an abstraction, but as a felt reality, a place where psyche and cosmos mirror each other, where the pattern in your suffering is not just yours but ours, where your dreams speak not only your truth but the world's. The one world is not a utopia. It is not a belief system. It is the primordial knowing that there is no separation between your inner life and the life of the whole. Every repression echoes through culture. Every awakening ripples through lineage. Your grief may begin in childhood, but its roots reach back generations. Your healing may feel private, but it bends the arc of humanity. To become whole is not only to reunite the fractured parts within, it is to take your place in the great pattern of meaning itself. In this light, symbols are not just decorations of the unconscious. They are its language. The dream image, the synchronicity, the recurring archetype, all are attempts by the deeper intelligence of life to guide you, to orient you toward integration, to reconnect you with a truth larger than logic. Here, psychology becomes alchemy. The symptom becomes symbol. The wound becomes initiation. The self becomes soul. And it is here that you understand the deepest truth of all, that the unconscious has never been your enemy. It has always been your guide, speaking in the only language it had left when words failed. It sent you neurosis not as punishment, but as redirection. It sent you patterns not to trap you, but to free you once you learned to read them. The suffering you feared most became the doorway, and behind it a voice you had buried, your own. Now when you walk through the world, you do not rush to explain yourself. You do not collapse when misunderstood. You do not need to be approved of to feel real. You carry a different kind of presence. Quiet, rooted, magnetic. You are no longer governed by the shadow you feared because you have turned toward it. You have spoken with it. You have listened long enough for it to trust you back. This is mastery not of others, but of your own depth. Not the domination of the unconscious, but union with it. Not the silencing of desire, but its refinement. You no longer seek to escape your story, you seek to live it fully. And that perhaps is the greatest freedom of all. Then let us finish not with answers, but with integration, not with certainty, but with presence. You have walked the labyrinth of the unconscious. You have stood at the gates of repression and looked into the eyes of what you once feared. You have listened to the voice beneath the voice, the one that trembles with truth. You have shed illusions like old skin, each layer falling not as failure, but as initiation. And now, you stand at the threshold of return, not to the person you were, but to the life that waited for you to awaken. The return is quiet. There is no applause. There is no fanfare. Only a stillness, a deep interior silence where the divided self becomes whole again. You begin to see life not as something that happened to you, but as something that has always been unfolding through you. Every loss was a messenger. Every shadow was a teacher. Every longing was a compass. You are no longer confused by contradiction. You do not seek to eliminate it. You become the vessel that holds it. Grief and gratitude, rage and reverence, emptiness and presence. All of it belongs. All of it breathes through you. You are no longer seeking transcendence. You are embodying immanence, divinity in the detail, soul in the soil of your life. Now, when you dream, you listen. When you repeat, you inquire. When you desire, you no longer ask, "Is this wrong?" But, "What does this point to?" You do not need to be perfect. You need only be awake. And in that wakefulness, something sacred stirs. Not salvation, but participation. In your healing, you begin to heal what came before you. In your freedom, you make space for others to exhale. You are not alone. You are a strand in the larger psyche, and every insight, every integration echoes through the web of being. You are the dreamer. And now, you are also the interpreter. You are the patient. And now, you are also the analyst. You are the myth. And now, you are also the author. There is no higher calling than to live consciously, to make the unconscious conscious, to meet life not with defense but with depth. So go not back, but forward, not upward, but inward. Let your days become the final act of this journey. Let your silence speak. Let your presence reveal. Let your very existence become an offering to the one world, to the forgotten self, to the shadow that no longer hides, to the desire that no longer apologizes. You are not waiting for meaning. You are making it every time you choose awareness over avoidance, truth over comfort, depth over distraction. This is the work. This is the way. This is the return. And so you arrive not at the summit of something glorious, but at the center of something honest, not victorious, but whole. And that, in truth, is the only kind of victory that ever mattered. You are not the child who was abandoned. You are not the echo of your failures. You are not the illusion of perfection you once chased to feel safe. You are the one who stayed, the one who kept walking, the one who faced the mirror and didn't flinch, the one who learned to listen when silence was all that answered, the one who descended into memory, into madness, into meaning, and returned not with a trophy but with truth. You once believed the hero had to look like someone else, stronger, wiser, untouched by pain. But now you see, the hero was always the one carrying the pain and walking anyway. You are not healed. You are healing. And there is no shame in that. There is no timeline for soul work. There is no finish line for becoming real. The true journey was never toward becoming someone new, but toward reclaiming who you were before the world told you what to fear, before you fragmented yourself to be loved, before you silenced your truth to belong. Now, you return to yourself, not to the self you performed, but to the one who witnessed it all quietly inside, the one who never left, the one who speaks in dreams, the one who loves without needing to be seen. And that self, the shadow, and the soul together walks with you now, not behind, not beneath, but beside you, equal, integrated, yours. The world will not always understand this version of you. You may lose some things. You may outgrow some people, but you will never again abandon yourself. Because now you know the hero you were waiting for isn't coming. He is already here. She is already breathing. They are already awake in you. So go live not like someone who's trying to prove their worth, but like someone who finally remembers they were never broken. The journey ends, not with a conclusion, but with a beginning, real, rooted, and entirely your own.